They called me a nanny in my own family, so I bought the beach house they all fought over. The crystal chandelier in my niece Emma's dining room caught the morning light just right, casting tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. I'd arrived 2 hours early, as usual, my arms loaded with carefully wrapped presents and a homemade strawberry cake that had taken me half the night to perfect. While everyone else would stumble in fashionably late with store-bought cards, I was already arranging flowers and folding napkins into perfect swans. "Oh good, you're here," my sister Caroline breezed in, still in her silk pajamas, a mimosa already in her hand despite it being barely 10 in the morning. "Can you move those chairs? And maybe do something about the music? It's too, I don't know, too something." I smiled and nodded, the way I always did, the way I'd been doing for 34 years. Emma bounced down the stairs in a dress that cost more than most people's rent, her 16-year-old face glowing with excitement. She hugged me tight, and for a moment, my heart swelled. This was why I did it all, for moments like these. "Aunt Sarah, you made it. Did you bring the photo albums I asked for?" "Of course, sweetheart." I pulled out 3 leather-bound albums I'd spent weeks organizing, filled with Emma's baby pictures, family vacations, and milestones that everyone else had been too busy to document properly. I even added some new ones from last month. Emma's eyes lit up as she flipped through the pages. "You remember everything. Mom never keeps track of this stuff." Caroline rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "That's what Aunt Sarah is for. She's better at this family stuff than any of us." The comment stung a little, but I pushed it aside. I was good at this. I took pride in remembering birthdays, organizing celebrations, keeping everyone connected. It mattered to me, even if it sometimes felt like a thankless job. The rest of the family trickled in over the next hour. My brother Marcus with his wife Jenny, my cousin David with his new girlfriend whose name I'd already forgotten, and Uncle Pete who immediately made a beeline for the bar cart. They air-kissed Emma, handed over gift bags that still had price tags, and settled into their usual spots while I made sure everyone had drinks and appetizers. "Sarah, can you grab the coffee from the kitchen?" Jenny called out, not looking up from her phone. "Sarah, do you have any aspirin?" "I'm dying." Marcus groaned dramatically. "Sarah, where did you put the extra chairs?" I moved through the crowd like a ghost, anticipating needs before they were spoken, cleaning up messes before they were noticed. This was my role in the family, the one who made everything run smoothly so everyone else could enjoy themselves. When it came time for the birthday toast, Caroline stood up, swaying slightly from her 3rd mimosa. She cleared her throat and smiled at Emma with genuine motherly love. "I can't believe my baby girl is 16, she began, her voice thick with emotion. "It feels like yesterday you were this tiny thing who couldn't sleep unless Aunt Sarah was rocking you." A few people chuckled, and I felt a warm glow at the memory. I had spent countless nights with baby Emma when Caroline was struggling with postpartum depression, something the family never talked about but everyone knew. "Seriously though," Caroline continued, "I don't know what any of us would do without Sarah. She's like a second mom to Emma. Or honestly, more like our family's live-in nanny." The room erupted in laughter. Good-natured, affectionate laughter that was meant to be a compliment. I could see it in their faces. They thought they were being sweet, acknowledging how much I did for everyone. But something inside me cracked. A nanny. That's what I was to them. Not an aunt who chose to be deeply involved in her niece's life. Not a sister who stepped up when needed. Not a woman who had her own dreams and ambitions and chose to prioritize family. A nanny. I stood there, frozen, my smile plastered on my face as everyone continued laughing and nodding in agreement. Emma looked embarrassed, probably sensing the undercurrent of something not quite right. But the adults were oblivious, already moving on to the next topic. "And the best part," Uncle Pete added with a grin, "is that we don't even have to pay her." More laughter, more nods, more of me standing there, feeling smaller and smaller with each passing second. I excused myself to the bathroom, my hands shaking as I gripped the marble countertop. In the mirror, I saw a woman who had given everything to a family that saw her as hired help. A woman who had sacrificed her own social life, her own romantic opportunities, her own adventures, to be available whenever anyone needed anything. The worst part? They weren't wrong. I had been their nanny. I had let myself become the family's unpaid emotional labor, the one who remembered everything, organized everything, fixed everything. And somewhere along the way, I had forgotten that I was supposed to be an equal member of this family, not its service provider. I splashed cold water on my face and returned to the party, but something fundamental had shifted. As I watched my family continue their celebration, I realized I was seeing them clearly for the first time in years. They loved me, I knew that. But they loved me the way you love a faithful dog, with gratitude for services rendered, not with respect for who I actually was. The party continued around me, but I felt like I was watching it from behind glass. Every request, every assumption that I would handle something, every casual dismissal of my time and energy, it all looked different now. As I drove home that evening, Emma's leftover cake in the passenger seat, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being the family nanny. It was time to remind them that I was Sarah Morrison, not their hired help. And I had a feeling they were going to be very surprised by what that actually meant. The walk to clear my head after Emma's party led me somewhere I hadn't planned to go, down the familiar coastal path to Aunt Deb's old beach house. My feet seemed to know the way by themselves, following the route I'd taken so many times during those long, difficult months. The house sat empty now, its weathered shingles and overgrown garden telling the story of 2 years of abandonment. I could almost see the ghosts of childhood summers, Caroline and Marcus running through the sprinklers, David building elaborate sand castles, all of us crowding around Aunt Deb's kitchen table for her famous blueberry pancakes. Back then, this place had been magic. Pure, uncomplicated magic. But those memories felt hollow now, knowing what I knew about how it had all ended. I wandered to the edge of the beach, my shoes sinking into the familiar sand. The late afternoon sun cast everything in gold, and for a moment I could hear Aunt Deb's voice on the wind, calling us in for dinner, warning us not to go too far into the water. She'd been our refuge during the chaos of our parents' messy divorce. While Mom and Dad screamed at lawyers and threw dishes, we'd spend entire summers here with Aunt Deb, who taught us to paint watercolors and told us stories about her travels around the world. She was the free spirit of the family, the one who chose adventure over marriage, art over security. And when she got sick, when arthritis twisted her hands so she couldn't hold a paintbrush anymore, when her mind started to slip and she needed someone to help with her medications and doctor appointments, where was everyone then? The memories crashed over me like the waves against the rocks. Month after month of driving the 2 hours to this house every weekend, sleeping on her uncomfortable couch because she was afraid to be alone at night, helping her to the bathroom when her dignity was already in tatters, listening to her cry about the pain, about her fears, about feeling forgotten by the world. "Where is everyone, Sarah?" she'd asked me one particularly bad night, her voice small and confused. "Why don't they visit anymore?" I'd made excuses for them. Caroline was busy with her new promotion. Marcus had the kids' soccer schedules. David was going through his divorce. Everyone had their reasons, their important lives that couldn't accommodate an old woman's needs. But the truth was simpler and more painful. They'd all moved on. Aunt Deb's house was a summer memory, not a current responsibility. They loved her in theory, but when love required sacrifice, required showing up when it was hard and uncomfortable and sad, they were nowhere to be found. I was the one who found her after she fell and broke her hip. I was the one who slept in the hospital chair during her pneumonia. I was the one who held her hand through the long nights when she was scared and confused, when the pain medication made her see things that weren't there. And in those final weeks, when her mind was clear but her body was failing, she'd started telling me things. Things about the family that I'd never known. Things about herself that she'd kept hidden for decades. "They think this house will just fall into their laps," she'd whispered to me one evening, her voice barely audible over the machines. "Like everything else they've ever wanted. But they're wrong, Sarah. They're so very wrong." I thought she was rambling, her medication making her paranoid. But then she'd grabbed my hand with surprising strength and fixed me with those sharp blue eyes that age hadn't dimmed. You're the only one who stayed. The only one who cared enough to see me through to the end. They don't deserve this place, and they don't deserve you." 3 days before she died, she'd made me promise something. Something that had seemed impossible at the time. Something that had felt like the desperate wish of a dying woman who'd been hurt too deeply by the people she'd loved most. Now, standing here in the place where she'd spent her final years mostly alone, that promise felt like prophecy. My phone buzzed. A text in the family group chat I'd somehow been added to while I wasn't paying attention. "Caroline, emergency family meeting Sunday. We need to figure out what to do about Aunt Deb's house. The county is making noise about back taxes. Marcus, about time. We've been letting it sit there for 2 years. David, I vote we sell it and split the money 3 ways. None of us can afford to maintain a beach house anyway. 3 ways, not 4. They'd already decided I didn't get a say in this, just like they decided I didn't get a say in anything else. I was the family helper, the one who cleaned up messes and organized logistics. I wasn't an heir or a decision maker. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been the only one with Aunt Deb when she'd made her final arrangements. I was the only one who knew what she'd whispered to me in her last week, the only one who knew what she'd given me. And I was the only one who knew that their emergency family meeting was about 2 years too late. I looked back at the empty house one more time, remembering Aunt Deb's final words to me. "If you ever need peace, make this place yours." At the time, I'd thought she meant spiritually, emotionally. I'd thought she was telling me to find peace in the memories we'd made here. But Aunt Deb had always been more practical than poetic. And she'd always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else. The family group chat was buzzing by the time I got home Sunday evening. 23 messages debating the Aunt Deb situation, as they'd taken to calling it. I scrolled through their assumptions, their plans, their casual dismissal of the woman who had raised us when our parents couldn't be bothered. "Caroline, I think we should meet at the house next weekend. Sarah, can you get the keys from somewhere?" Marcus, good idea. We need to see what condition it's in before we decide whether to renovate or just sell as is. David, either way, Sarah should handle the estate sales stuff. She's got time for that kind of thing. There it was again. Sarah has time. Sarah can handle it. Sarah, the unmarried, childless sister who apparently had nothing better to do than manage everyone else's inheritance disputes. If only they knew. I walked into my home office, a converted bedroom in my modest 2-bedroom house that they'd all seen countless times. To them, it looked like a craft room. Shelves lined with fabric samples, paint swatches, and design books. A desk covered with what appeared to be hobby sketches and color palettes. They glanced in here during family gatherings and seen exactly what I'd wanted them to see, Sarah's little creative outlet. What they'd never bothered to notice were the awards tucked discreetly on the bookshelf. The contracts filed neatly in labeled binders. The expensive camera equipment I used for client portfolios. The business license framed and hanging behind the door where no casual visitor would spot it. Morrison Design Solutions had been operating successfully for 8 years. It started small, a neighbor asking me to help redecorate their living room, another friend needing advice on paint colors. I had a natural eye for space and color, something Aunt Deb had encouraged when I was young. "You see things differently, Sarah," she used to tell me when we'd rearrange her furniture together. "You understand how people want to feel in their spaces." What began as weekend side projects slowly grew into something bigger. Word of mouth led to bigger clients. Bigger clients led to celebrity referrals. Celebrity referrals led to non-disclosure agreements and fees that would make my family's head spin. I pulled out my laptop and opened the client folder I'd been working on last week. A tech executive's Manhattan penthouse renovation. Budget, $2.3 million. The project after that? A famous actress's Hamptons estate. After that, a Fortune 500 CEO's corporate headquarters redesign. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my family saw me as the helpful spinster sister with too much time on her hands, I was managing 7-figure budgets and coordinating with architects, contractors, and artisans across the country. The same organizational skills they took for granted in planning their birthday parties and family events. Those skills ran a business that grossed more last year than Marcus and Caroline's salaries combined. But I'd never told them, never corrected their assumptions about my little hobby.
Why?
Because every time I'd started to share something about my work, they'd interrupt with their own problems, their own needs, their own drama. Eventually, I stopped trying. It was easier to let them think I was just Sarah the helper than to fight for their attention and respect. The business had grown so organically that I'd never really stopped to calculate my net worth until last year, when my accountant insisted I needed to restructure for tax purposes. The number had shocked even me. 8 years of reinvesting profits, living modestly, and saving almost everything had added up to more than enough to buy whatever I wanted, including beach houses. I opened my phone and dialed the number I'd memorized 2 years ago, but never had the courage to call. Patterson Real Estate. This is Janet. Hi, Janet. This is Sarah Morrison. I called about the Ocean View property 2 years ago. The beach house on Maple Cove. Oh, yes. I remember you. You were asking about the Harrison property. It's still available, actually. The family situation has been complicated. I almost laughed. Complicated was one word for it. I'm ready to make an offer, I said.
Cash.
There was a pause. Cash? For the full asking price. I'll need to see the most recent inspection reports and tax information, but yes. Full price, cash, quick closing. Well, Janet's voice perked up considerably. That would certainly simplify things. The property has some back taxes owed, and there are maintenance issues, but nothing that can't be handled. Are you available to see it this week? Actually, I know the property very well. Send me all the paperwork. I want to move on this immediately. After I hung up, I sat in my office surrounded by the evidence of the life I'd built in secret. Design awards from industry publications they'd never heard of. Thank you notes from clients whose names they'd recognize from magazine covers. Bank statements showing a balance that would fund their dream vacations 10 times over. All of it invisible to them because they'd never bothered to look beyond their assumptions. My phone buzzed with another group chat message. Caroline, Sarah, can you call that real estate agent tomorrow? We need to find out what the house is actually worth before we make any decisions. I smiled and typed back, already on it, which was true, just not in the way they imagined. By this time next week, they'd learn what I'd known for 8 years. Sarah Morrison wasn't just the family helper. She was a woman who built empires in the shadows, and she was finally ready to step into the light. 3 days after my call with Janet Patterson, I sat in the law office of Mitchell and Associates, a folder thick with documents spread across the mahogany conference table. My attorney, David Mitchell, no relation to my cousin David, thankfully reviewed the papers one final time. The holding company structure is solid, he said, adjusting his glasses. Ocean View Properties LLC will own the house, with you as the sole member. Completely legal, completely private. Your family won't be able to trace it back to you unless you choose to reveal it. I nodded, my pen hovering over the signature line. 2 years of carrying Aunt Deb's final letter in my purse had led to this moment. Her words echoed in my mind. They think they're entitled to everything, but entitlement isn't the same as ownership. You'll understand when the time comes. The time had definitely come. The previous owner's estate has already agreed to the terms, David continued. Full cash payment, assumption of back taxes, immediate closing. They seemed quite relieved, actually. Apparently, there's been some family drama about the property. If only he knew. While I was signing papers in this downtown law office, my family was 3 hours away having their emergency meeting at Caroline's house. I could picture them around her dining room table, the same one where they'd call me their nanny just a week ago, planning out their inheritance as if it were already theirs. My phone had been buzzing all morning with group chat updates. Marcus called the county tax office. Back taxes are $47,000. More than I thought. Caroline, that's fine. We'll just deduct it from the sale price and split the rest. David, I found a realtor who specializes in coastal properties. She can give us a market analysis. Jenny, what about all Aunt Deb's stuff inside? Someone needs to go through it. Caroline, Sarah can handle that part. She's good with sentimental stuff. I'd stopped responding to their messages yesterday, claiming I was busy with work. They probably assumed I was organizing someone's closet or planning another family event. The irony was almost painful. "There is one interesting detail," David said, pulling out another document. The estate agent mentioned that the deceased owner left specific instructions about the sale. Apparently, she wanted it sold to someone who would love it the way she did, not just the highest bidder. My throat tightened. Even in death, Aunt Deb was looking out for me. She also left this. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Aunt Deb's careful script. "The executor was instructed to give it to you when the sale was finalized." With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, not a legal document this time, just a letter. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, it means you've figured out what I really left you. Not just a house, but a choice. The choice to stop letting them take everything while giving you nothing in return. I know what they think of you. I know how they treat you. I've watched them use your generous heart for 30 years, and I've seen you shrink a little smaller each time you put their needs before your own. This house isn't an inheritance. It's an investment in your freedom. You were the only one who saw me as a person worth caring for when I needed it most. You earned this, Sarah. Not through blood or family obligation, but through love. Don't let them guilt you. Don't let them make you feel selfish. You've given them enough of yourself. Now take something back. The house has always been yours in every way that mattered. I'm just making it official. All my love and faith in your strength, Aunt Deb. P.S. Check the master bedroom closet. I left you something else." I blinked back tears as David cleared his throat diplomatically. "Shall we proceed with the signing?" 20 minutes later, I walked out of that office as the legal owner of the house my family was currently planning to divide among themselves. The deed was filed, the taxes paid, the keys in my purse next to Aunt Deb's letter. My phone rang as I reached my car.
Caroline.
"Sarah, finally. We've been trying to reach you all day. The meeting went great. We found a realtor, and she thinks we can get at least $800,000 for the house, maybe more. After taxes and fees, that's still over $200,000 each." "That's nice," I said, unlocking my car door. "We need you to coordinate with the estate lawyer about getting access to the house. Can you handle that this week? We want to start cleaning it out and getting it ready to show." I looked up at the law office building, where 30 floors above me, David Mitchell was probably filing my ownership papers with the state. "Actually, Caroline, I think there might be a complication with that plan." "What kind of complication?" "Sarah, please tell me you didn't mess something up with the paperwork." For 34 years, I'd swallowed every dismissive comment, every assumption that I was incompetent, every casual insult disguised as family teasing. But sitting in my car, holding the deed to Aunt Deb's house, I felt something I'd never experienced before, the power that comes from knowing something they didn't. "I didn't mess anything up," I said calmly. "But you might want to call that realtor back and cancel the appointment."
Why?
"Sarah, what's going on?" I started my car and pulled out of the parking space. "I'll explain everything at dinner this weekend. I have some news to share." "What kind of news?" "Sarah, you're scaring me." "The good kind," I said and hung up. As I drove toward the coast, toward my new house, I realized Aunt Deb had been right about something else. This wasn't just about real estate. This was about finally learning to value myself the way she'd always valued me. And that was worth more than all the money in the world. 2 weeks later, I stood in the kitchen of Aunt Deb's beach house, my beach house, preparing dinner for the family meeting they'd been demanding. The late afternoon sun streamed through windows I'd spent the morning cleaning, casting golden light across surfaces I now legally owned. The house felt different with me in it, as the owner rather than the caretaker. Every room held memories, but now they belonged to me to preserve or change as I wished. I'd already found what Aunt Deb had left in the master bedroom closet, her collection of travel journals, decades of adventures and dreams, along with a note that simply said, "Now you can have your own adventures." My family arrived exactly as I'd expected them to, like they owned the place. "Sarah, thank God you got us keys," Caroline called out, breezing through the front door without knocking. She was carrying a notebook and measuring tape, already in planning mode. This place has so much potential. I'm thinking we could stage it with some coastal chic furniture, really play up the beachfront location. Marcus followed with his laptop bag, clearly ready to crunch numbers. I've been researching comparable sales in the area. We're looking at potentially $850,000 if we play this right. David brought his new girlfriend, Stephanie, who immediately started taking photos with her phone. This will look amazing on my Instagram when we start renovating, she gushed. Beach house flips are so trending right now. Jenny came in last, carrying a box of garbage bags. I thought we could start going through Aunt Deb's things tonight. Get rid of the junk so we can see what we're really working with. I watched them spread out through the living room, discussing paint colors and furniture arrangements, debating whether to keep the original hardwood floors or replace them with something more modern. They talked about our house and our inheritance and our plans with casual certainty. Not once did any of them ask how I'd gotten the keys. I made dinner, I announced, gesturing toward the dining room. We should eat before we get into the business discussion. They followed me into the dining room, where I'd set the table with Aunt Deb's good china and the wildflowers I'd picked from her garden that morning. As they sat down, I noticed Marcus looking around appreciatively. Now that I really look at this place, it's in better shape than I thought. Sarah, you must have been maintaining it somehow. Something like that, I said, serving the seafood risotto I'd spent the afternoon perfecting. Caroline pulled out her notebook. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking for timeline. We list it in 3 weeks after we've decluttered and staged it. Stephanie can handle the social media marketing. Actually, I interrupted. Before we get into all that, I have something to show you. I walked to the sideboard and picked up the manila envelope I'd placed there earlier. Inside were copies of the deed, Aunt Deb's letter to me, and a few other documents that would change everything. What's that? Marcus asked, not looking up from his phone where he was apparently calculating renovation costs. Information about the house that you should probably see. I handed each of them an envelope. Go ahead, open them. Caroline opened hers first, her eyes scanning the deed. I watched her face change from confusion to disbelief to something approaching shock. What is this? This says the house belongs to some company called Ocean View Properties. That's right, I said calmly, sitting back down and taking a sip of my wine. Marcus looked up from his papers, his face pale. Sarah, this says the house was sold 3 weeks ago. How is that possible? We haven't signed anything. You haven't signed anything because you don't own anything to sign. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the waves crashing outside, the sound of seagulls, the tick of Aunt Deb's old grandfather clock. But inside the dining room, nobody seemed to be breathing. I don't understand, David said slowly. Who bought the house? I reached into my purse and pulled out my copy of the deed, setting it on the table next to my plate. I did. Jenny dropped her fork. You did what? I bought the house. 3 weeks ago. Cash purchase. All taxes paid. Deed filed with the county. Ocean View Properties LLC is my company. Caroline's voice came out as barely a whisper. You bought it? How could you possibly afford to buy it? The same way I've afforded everything else for the past 8 years. My business. You're crafting? Marcus looked genuinely confused. My interior design firm. Morrison Design Solutions. I've been running it for 8 years. Celebrity clients, million-dollar budgets. The works. You'd know that if you'd ever bothered to ask what I actually do instead of assuming I just sit around waiting to help with your problems. Stephanie's phone slipped from her hands and clattered to the floor. Nobody moved to pick it up. But you can't just buy the family house, Caroline sputtered. We're supposed to inherit it together. It belongs to all of us. I pulled out Aunt Deb's final letter and set it next to the deed. Actually, it belongs to whoever she chose to leave it to. And she chose me. The person who took care of her when nobody else could be bothered. The room erupted in overlapping voices, accusations, and demands for explanations. But I just sat there, eating my dinner, watching them process the fact that their assumptions had been catastrophically wrong. For the first time in my life, I wasn't rushing to fix their problem or manage their emotions. I was just Sarah Morrison, homeowner, letting them figure it out for themselves. 3 months later, I sat on the wraparound porch of my beach house, coffee steaming in my hands as the sunrise painted the ocean in shades of pink and gold. The morning ritual had become sacred to me, this quiet hour before the world woke up, when the only sounds were waves and seagulls and the gentle creak of the rocking chair Aunt Deb had loved. The chair where she used to sit and tell me stories about the places she'd traveled, the life she'd built on her own terms. Now it was mine, and I was finally understanding what she'd been trying to teach me all along. The family dinner 3 months ago had ended exactly as I'd expected. After the initial shock wore off, the accusations started flying. Caroline had accused me of being sneaky and manipulative. Marcus had demanded to know why I'd hidden my financial success. David had actually used the word betrayal, as if my refusal to bankroll their assumptions somehow constituted a personal attack. Jenny had been the worst, suggesting that I'd somehow tricked Aunt Deb into leaving me the house, taking advantage of an elderly woman's loneliness. That comment had finally broken my calm composure. I was there, I'd said, my voice shaking with years of suppressed anger. Every doctor's appointment, every sleepless night, every moment she was scared or in pain or confused. Where were you? Where were any of you when she needed family the most? The silence that followed had been answer enough. They'd left one by one, muttering about lawyers and unfairness and family loyalty. Caroline had been the last to go, standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes. "This isn't who you are, Sarah," she'd said. "You're the one who brings us all together. You're the one who takes care of everyone." "Maybe," I'd replied, "but I'm also the one who's tired of being taken for granted." She hadn't spoken to me since. None of them had, except for a few terse text messages about family business that I'd ignored. They tried to rally Emma to their cause, painting me as the villain who'd stolen their inheritance, but my 16-year-old niece had surprised everyone by asking the obvious question: why didn't any of you visit Great Aunt Deb when she was sick? The answer to that question had apparently ended the family's united front against me. Now, watching the sun climb higher over the horizon, I felt something I'd never experienced before: complete peace with my own choices. The guilt I'd expected never came. The loneliness I'd feared never materialized. Instead, I discovered the profound satisfaction of living authentically for the first time in my adult life. My business had thrived without the constant interruptions of family emergencies that somehow always became my responsibility. I'd taken on 2 new celebrity clients and hired an assistant to help manage the growing workload. The quiet hours I used to spend organizing other people's lives now belonged to me, and I'd filled them with painting, reading, and long walks on the beach. I'd also started traveling, using Aunt Deb's journals as inspiration for my own adventures. Last month, I'd spent 2 weeks in Tuscany, touring the vineyards and art studios she'd written about decades earlier. Next month, I was flying to New Zealand to see the landscapes that had captured her imagination in the 1980s. For the first time in my life, I was living for Sarah Morrison instead of living for everyone else's version of who Sarah Morrison should be. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking it might be Caroline or Marcus finally ready to have a real conversation about what had happened. But it was Emma. "And Sarah, can I come visit this weekend? I want to see the house and hear Great Aunt Deb's stories." I smiled and typed back, "Of course. I'll make her famous blueberry pancakes. Can't wait. P.S. My friends think you're totally badass for buying your own beach house. They want to know if you have any other secret superpowers." I laughed out loud, the sound carrying across the empty beach. Secret superpowers. If only they knew that my greatest superpower was finally learning to say no to people who only valued me for what I could give them. As I finished my coffee and prepared to start another day in my new life, I thought about the woman I'd been at Emma's Sweet 16 party just a few months ago. The woman who'd smiled through being called the family nanny, who'd swallowed the hurt and carried on as if their words didn't matter. That woman had been drowning in other people's expectations, suffocating under the weight of their endless needs and demands. She'd been so busy being what everyone else wanted that she'd forgotten who she actually was. But she'd also been stronger than anyone gave her credit for, including herself. The morning breeze carried the scent of salt air and wild roses from Aunt Deb's garden. I stood up, stretching in the warm sunshine, and looked out at the endless expanse of ocean that now belonged to me. Let them call me whatever they wanted. Selfish, secretive, ungrateful. I'd heard it all in the past 3 months. But I was no longer their nanny, their helper, their convenient solution to every problem. I was Sarah Morrison, successful businesswoman, world traveler, and owner of the most beautiful view on the East Coast. And for the first time in my life, that was more than enough.